Hey everybody, welcome back to Football Talk with Vinny. In today's video, we're going to go over the last couple days and the important signings of the free agency. So obviously in the last video, I kind of went over days 1 and 2. Usually in the NFL, it's just kind of how it works. Usually the first day or so of free agency, a lot of the guys get signed. It's kind of just how the NFL works. So over the past 3 or 4 days, there's been a lot more signings as well. So I want to briefly go over some of those. And just my thoughts on those signings. So we'll get started. Trent Williams actually re-signed with the San Francisco 49ers. The deal was for 6 years and $138 million, which now makes him the highest paid offensive lineman in the NFL. Obviously well deserved, just made the All-Pro team, after taking that whole year off in Washington because he had a falling out with the organization. But he kind of came back and showed that he can play at the All-Pro level, and he still is one of the best left tackles, if not the best in the game. I think a very big signing for the Niners. Obviously, you want to keep that offensive line intact. It helps your running game, which is very good and was very good last year. And also, so whether it's Jimmy G at the quarterback position this year or you guys draft another player, you do need to protect the quarterback and give them time to throw to the weapons. Another signing was AJ Green signed a 1-year deal to go with the Arizona Cardinals. That's a sneaky good move, right? Especially if Larry Fitzgerald retires, you do need to replace him. But even if Larry Fitzgerald decides to come back for another year, you're essentially just adding in a number 2. I mean, no disrespect to Fitzgerald, but he is 36, I want to say, or 37. So I think AJ Green could come in there and be the number 2, which makes Larry Fitzgerald the number 3 at that point. I mean, that is a scary trio of receivers to have to guard. Couple of trades actually for the Oakland Raiders. They traded Rodney Hudson, the center, to the Arizona Cardinals. Now it was Hudson and a 7th round pick, and in exchange they got a 3rd round pick. And then they also traded Gabe Jackson to Seattle for a 5th round pick. So if you're the Raiders, I mean, you're kind of losing a couple of your offensive linemen that were good players. So I'm not really sure what the plan is to replace them. And if you're those teams that are acquiring those guys, a team like Arizona, right? You're trying to make some moves to definitely get into the playoffs. And if you're Seattle, you got to add some offensive linemen to keep Russell Wilson happy. So I like the moves from both of those teams' perspective. But from the Raiders, kind of not really making sense. Another big move, Curtis Samuel signed a 3-year, $34.5 million deal to go to the Washington football team. I actually talked about it in my NFC East video where I thought that the football team could use a wide receiver, right? Because you have the good Pro Bowler in Terry McLaurin, but you need a guy opposite of him to kind of help your entire offense, right? Because now it's going to be very difficult to double Terry McLaurin because you have a Pro Bowl caliber wide receiver on the other end, and in turn having 2 good receivers is going to make it hard to stack the box and stop the run. And obviously, whoever is the quarterback for the football team, whether that is Fitzpatrick or Henneke, obviously it's going to give them, more weapons to be successful. Another big one, Patrick Peterson signed a 1-year, $10 million deal to go with the Vikings. I really like that move. The Vikings actually had a very young defense and a very young secondary. I think they started 2 rookie corners last year. So getting a veteran in there, even if he's not the number 1 corner, right, because he is getting a little older, if he becomes a number 2, that's okay. Just to have him in your locker room as that, veteran leadership, kind of teach the rest of the young DBs, kind of how to play the position, how to watch film and all that stuff. I think it's needed from the Vikings perspective. For the Kansas City Chiefs, they did sign Kyle Long to a 1-year, $5 million deal, So at least now they've gotten 2 of the 5 offensive lineman positions kind of worked out. They gave Joe Thuney the $80 million 5-year deal in day 1, I believe, of free agency. So obviously if you're the Chiefs, you still have some ways to go to re-sign, or if you don't re-sign either of the tackles that you lost, maybe draft some in free agency to really address the rest of the offensive line. Another move for Arizona, they actually signed Matt Prater, the kicker from the Detroit Lions. Right, again, Arizona's making a lot of moves for a team, that was competitive last year, almost made it to the playoffs. So I think they're really trying to get into the playoffs this year. Some other smaller moves, the Dallas Cowboys re-signed Jordan Lewis. Mitch Trubisky signed as a backup quarterback in Buffalo. Rashad Perriman from the Jets signed a deal to play for the Detroit Lions. Riley Reif, an offensive lineman from the Vikings, went to Cincinnati. Desmond Trufant actually signed with the Bears, and they actually released Kyle Fuller. And then Kyle Fuller actually signed a 1-year, $9.5 million deal to go to Denver. So that move I actually do like if you're Denver, right? You have a lot of young weapons on the offensive side of the ball. Hopefully Drew Lock takes a step forward. And if he can, you can easily see Denver being a top 10 offense this year. And if they are, you're bringing back Von Miller, right? You already picked up his option. You got to get a little better on the defensive side of the ball. This way you could be a team that can maybe, challenge for a playoff spot. It's going to be tough to win the division, but I think the playoffs is something that's, reasonable for the Denver Broncos this season. A couple other smaller moves. Deshaun Jackson signed with the Rams. Philip Lindsay went to the Houston Texans, so now they have Philip Lindsay and Mark Ingram, so they're starting to get a couple of backs just to have some depth there. And then Chris Carson re-signed with Seattle. So if you're Seattle, you definitely want to, re-sign as many good players as you can, bring in some offensive linemen. I think the whole goal of this season is to make sure Russell Wilson is happy and you keep him in Seattle. Now, for some other moves that I kind of want to go maybe a little bit more in depth, we'll start with teams that just signed maybe one guy. So we'll go with the Steelers, who were able to re-sign Juju Smith-Schuster for 1 year, $8 million. Now there's news coming out that he was actually offered a little bit more from teams like the Baltimore Ravens, and the Chiefs actually had an offer for him as well. But from everything that I've gathered from other, sources, they were all 1 year deals as well, which I was a little shocked. He is 26 years old, 25 years old. So for a young receiver like that to only get a 1 year deal, I understand in the market that we're in, the way that all teams' cap space is kind of lowered because of COVID. It's pretty crazy that a 25-year-old receiver can only get a 1 year deal. Other news, not free agency though, Justin Simmons was franchise tagged. He was actually able to come towards a long-term agreement with the Denver Broncos. Number ended up being 4 years and $61 million, so he is paid like a top-end safety, just like he's been playing for the last couple of years, so well-deserved from him. And again, same thing with them signing Kyle Fuller. You want to definitely make sure you keep as many of your good defensive players as you can and re-sign some more. So if that defense can take another step up this season, you can definitely see Denver getting it into the playoffs. And then the receiver for the Texans, Will Fuller, actually signed with the Dolphins. So I really like that move for Miami, right? You got to give Tua some weapons opposite of Devontae Parker, kind of similar to Washington, right? You have one good wide receiver, but if you add some other second and third string options, it makes the rest of your offense just easier to function, because now teams won't just be able to double Devontae Parker and shut your entire offense down. And then, unfortunately, another move that I really like is Anthony Harris, the safety for the Vikings, signed a 1 year, $5 million deal with Philly. I think that's pretty insane. I think if you look at like Pro Football Focus, Anthony Harris was a top 5 safety. So the fact that he was only able to get 1 year and $5 million, I'm not really sure what's going on. I mean, he's only 29, so I get it. He's going to eventually go towards the downside of his career, but the fact that he's played very well for the last 2 years, I know he had 6 interceptions in 2019. He had none this year, but a lot of times interceptions are just being in the right place in the right time. So you can be good in coverage and just not get an interception as a safety. So I really like that move if you're Philly. Obviously the division wasn't that great this year, so really all of the teams really feel like they have a chance. Which leads me to the Giants, and I did save them for last on purpose. They have signed a bunch of good players in the last couple days. If you're the Giants, it's almost like what New England did the first 2 days, where they kind of just won free agency in those first 2 days. The Giants are kind of, signing a bunch of guys now. So first they were able to get Kyle Rudolph, signed him to, I believe, a 2 year deal. Evan Ingram has not been able to stay healthy. And also when he does play, sometimes he's a little inconsistent. So getting that second tight end that's also a great red zone threat will help your entire offense out. And also, even if Ingram is to stay healthy, you're now able to run 2 tight end sets. You're able to have a second string tight end that's really, in some cases, better than some teams' number 1 tight end in Kyle Rudolph. Then right after that, you heard the big splash where they gave Kenny Golladay. He signed a 4 year, $72 million deal. So again, with Kenny Golladay making some big money, that's why I was a little shocked that Juju was only able to get the 1 year and $8 million. But let's talk about this from the Giants' perspective. Right, you got a guy like Sterling Shepard, who was a high round pick. I believe he was a first actually, but if not a first, maybe a second. He's been a little inconsistent, a little hurt. So obviously adding a true number 1 in Kenny Golladay it turns the Giants' receiving core from kind of below average to, I would say, about average to maybe slightly above. Right, because when you get a number one like Kenny Golladay, what that does now is it makes Sterling Shepard a number two, which now he becomes one of the better number twos in the league, right? And now you got Slayton, who played very well last year, and he's had to play over the last 2 years a lot of snaps because of the injuries from the wide receivers. So now he's your number three. So now you have a number three that's probably better than most. You have a number two that's better than most. And again, Kenny Golladay, while maybe I don't think he's probably not a top 10 receiver, he's probably a top 15 to 20 wide receiver. So you have a legit number one guy, maybe not a dominant number one, but you have a legit number one, which now makes Sterling Shepard a great two, and it makes Slayton a great three. So now your weapons overnight have become all above average. Getting Kyle Rudolph to go with Ingram makes your tight end group above average, if not very good, if Ingram can take a step up. Saquon's so good, he is easily a top 3-4 back in the NFL. So getting him back healthy is going to improve the rest of your offense in general, because now teams will have to respect the run game, so they'll have to bring that seventh man, maybe even an eighth man in the box. And when you get a guy like Kenny Golladay, you got guys that can get open on single coverage. But the Giants weren't even done there. They signed Adoree Jackson, the Tennessee Titans corner, to a 3-year, $39 million deal. And I saw a stat a couple days ago where Adoree Jackson from Pro Football Focus rankings, when he was manned up outside of the numbers, he was in the top 5 in coverage grade over the last 2 seasons. I believe Jalen Ramsey, Stephon Gilmore were, I think, the top 2 or 3, and then Adoree Jackson was like 4 or 5. So if you're the Giants, you signed James Bradbury last year, who played very well. Now you get Adoree Jackson. So, their defense was already good last year. So I think, the Giants, with these moves, even though they're in my division, they've made a lot of moves to where, I guess because Dak Prescott is probably the best quarterback in the division, a lot of people are going to give Dallas a nod just for that reason. But I think as a team, I think the Giants might be the most balanced team on the offensive defensive side of the ball, right? You got a team like Dallas that definitely is built on the offensive side, and you got a team like Washington that's definitely built on the defensive side. But I think if you take, where the offense should rank at the end of the season, where the defense should rank, I think the Giants, might have a better offense and defense, in terms of just overall talent. And a lot of times in football, if you just have a talented roster from top to bottom, you usually are able to win 10, 11 games, because there will be some weeks where you play a team, like Washington, for example, that you're going to play them and they have a great defense. So maybe your offense will struggle, but your defense is good enough to hold them to under 10, 15 points and allow you to win that ball game. And then when you play a team like Dallas, yeah, sure, Dallas is going to put up some points, but your offense is now going to be good enough to be able to move the ball pretty efficiently, I would think, against a team like Dallas that is kind of deficient in so many areas on the defensive side of the ball. So that was really it for a lot of the big moves. Obviously, there was a couple of smaller moves, maybe guys signing to be backups in other positions, right? So I'm not going to go over all the moves. I don't want the video to be 50 minutes long. But also, there are some big names on the free agent market still left. You got guys like Jadeveon Clowney, Justin Houston, T.Y. Hilton, Richard Sherman. Other guys like Carlos Dunlap, Melvin Ingram. Also like Malcolm Butler and Antonio Brown, even though a lot of people think he's going to go back to the Tampa Bay Bucks. Any team could essentially try to sign him to a offer sheet and just see if he takes it. Especially if you can give him a 2 or 3 year deal, he may take that over just a 1 year deal playing in Tampa again. So there definitely are some names out there. So, once you get past kind of this first week of free agency, this second week is kind of where teams that don't have a lot of cap space, they can actually start to sign players, right? Because after it's been a week, if you're a free agent, you haven't gotten a big deal yet, you probably won't get a big deal. So at that point, you may just be signing a 1 year short-term deal. So now a lot of these teams that maybe didn't have the money to sign, a 10, 12, $15 million a year player can now call up Clowney and say, hey, we'll give you a 1 year, $10, $11 million deal. Or it's a guy like T.Y. Hilton, right? If Juju signed 1 year and $8 million, maybe if you're a guy like T.Y., maybe you call him up and you try to offer him a 1 year and $8 million deal, right? A team that comes to mind, they probably won't spend because they almost never do. But if Green Bay were to sign T.Y. to a 1 year, like $8 million deal, that's something I believe they would be able to fit into their budget to give T.Y. $8 million. You add T.Y. to that receiving room, right? All of a sudden, I think your offense would be even harder to stop than it was last year, because obviously you're going to have to double. Obviously, you're going to have to double Davante Adams, but now T.Y. is a guy that, with a great quarterback like you saw in Andrew Luck, if you pair him with a guy like Aaron Rodgers, I think he can go back to putting up 1,000 yards and 7-8 touchdowns. So thank you guys for watching this video. That's going to be the end of this video. In the next week or so, as big names do sign, I'll try to put out a video for you guys. I mean, obviously it won't be as long because it's just going to be 1 or 2 guys signing. But yeah, free agency, as crazy as it always is, usually that first week, most guys are gone by the end of the first week. So obviously now we're trying to look forward to the draft at this point. I will be making some videos on that. Not only just my thoughts on the draft in general, but I will have, my own mock draft. I know all channels and everybody has their own mock draft. So I figured, why not? Let's do it. It'll give me something to do, give me a video to make for you guys as well. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you did like the video, make sure to like it and definitely subscribe. It does help out my channel. And I look forward to putting out those videos for you guys. Thank you.